literally fucking blackout. It does.
Egg has been planted.
Let's take a look what CAG has to say. That's very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, let's go.
Hi, we're members from the Space Combat team. It is a cross-disciplinary team from multiple teams at CIG. It includes members from Vehicle Experience Team, Vehicle Feature Team, Player Experience Team, and also several other departments. The main thing about these people is that they're invested in space combat and they're actively playing the game. We're going to discuss the current state of space combat in 3.14 and 3.15.
Okay.
And then we're going to talk about what things are working, what things we're unhappy with, and what changes are coming up in the short.
Wait, is it? Because give me a second. Is this the Vehicle Experience Team or not?
What's in space combat, and there are other disciplinary team from multiple team members from the Space Combat team.
Space Combat Team. I didn't know that team existed. Like a specific team that does that. I thought it was like Vehicle Experience Team and all that.
Playing the game. We're going to discuss the current state of space combat in 3.14 and 3.15. And then we're going to talk about what things are working, what things we're unhappy with, and what changes are coming up in the short and long term to make the experience better. And the last thing we're going to talk about is the importance of community, because we're not making this game in isolation for us. We're making it with and for you.
Okay. Let's get it going.
We went back through all the previous Capacitor releases and we looked at
what
was the most loved feature.
I think it is a bit too quiet for you, right?
What was the most loved features out of all these releases in the past, and which were the most interesting, what players said about these releases, what they didn't like about these releases. So it's just like an overview of the past design choices and just like an analysis of where they ended up with the game and what experience they brought to the game.
The second step was to analyze the works of John Boyd, who did a lot of works related to dogfighting and to military strategy theory in the past, meaning so-called OODA loops, which are really important for us for decision making. The third step was to have a lot of calls and chats with so-called subject matter experts. These are people who in the past were working or flying for the armed forces and have a heavy knowledge in dogfighting. We even went so far to have actual dogfighting lessons in flight simulators with former members of the Royal Air Force.
So we brought this all together through a series of combat summits, and this involved bringing people from different areas of the company together. So we went away from our kind of day-to-day stuff and we got together and talked about, you know, all these past releases, these theories we had about combat and how they kind of, you know, translate to the status and experience we were aiming for. And we tried to create a plan, you know, for the next 12 months. So we get asked what the high-level goals are as far as space combat goes to Stasis. This comes down to a few key points, which is a meaningful decision-making. So it's giving the player options and also giving the players the data to act on. So we give the player the information of the systems that we're building so they can make the choices.
The second part is giving every weapon and every vehicle and every other item a proper purpose in the game.
And then we embrace those limitations that those choices make. So the players have to make choices. So it isn't just a case of picking the best of everything. There's certain limitations that come with picking certain things. Then basically it's got to feel believable. So we aren't just artificially making those, you know, limitations for the sake of it. They actually come from real consequences of, you know, of our systems that we build.
And the last high-level goal we want to achieve is to avoid meta gameplay. We realize this is really hard, but we will try to eradicate it as much as possible.
Okay.
So where are we now with...
Like, I don't know when to start, like, commenting, because, like, I have things to say about the decision-making. Like, the moment I actually got back in SC, I had some sessions with some experienced pilots off stream in Arena Commander. Like, I instantly had questions, for example, to a system of capacitors in decision-making. Like, I just don't want to start discussing because they might cover it in the video, like, right? So let's keep watching, and then maybe we'll get back to that and speak a bit more, right?
Space combat. In 3.14 and 15, we tried to establish a new combat foundation, which meant for us stripping out the granular details in space combat balance for the time being, and focus only on the base combat experience first.
And that affected 4 key areas. The first was assigning all ships to a specific archetype. So no ship was the best for everything. And then it also allowed us to kind of kick off our journey to improve the multicore experience of Star Citizen. So there was a purpose to having more than one person in your ship.
Second, we did the same thing with weapons. Right now, there are only 2 archetypes in the game. One type of weapon is good against fighters, the other one is good against large ships. However, we will expand on that in the future. The third aspect is the shields. We simplified many dynamics in the interim to make them more readable and easier to balance. And lastly, we introduced the Capacitor gameplay, which in some sort is the stamina gameplay for our thrusters, weapons, and shields.
And that's what I wanted to talk about. Again, I'll let them speak first. I wanted to talk a lot, not a lot, but quite a bit about the Capacitor gameplay, right?
So with that state established, we can now talk about the combat improvements we want to try in the short term. And the very first of that is G-force exhaustion. In the past, we had a lot of G-forces, and during dogfighting, G-force was a very important part of how you handle your ship. That impact was lost over time. And we're currently working on bringing that back, which means lowering the G-force thresholds to force players to do certain maneuvers to recover from the exhaustion effects.
It's going to be really hard because there has to be such a fine balance in it, because the moment you crank the G-force exhaustion like high enough, a lot of ships will just lose their usability. If they're like high G ships, you will just not be able to fly them at a full extent, and like the moment you like pull out a maneuver, you instantly black out, right? It will be a very hard thing to actually tweak properly, right?
You know, our goal with this is that you'll need to be really careful with, you know, not only how you manage the energy on your ship, but how you manage your ability to sustain Gs over the long term.
Let's quickly expand on the weapon archetypes and variations. At the moment, there's only 2 archetypes for weapons in the game. One is good against fighters, and the other one is good against large ships. But we would like to expand on these types. We would like to see specialized weaponry against infantry, specialized weaponry to intercept ordnance and incoming missiles. We're also thinking about suppression weapons.
Remember interceptor missiles I was talking about back in the day, when there was like a lot of Spectrum discussion? When I asked, like I did few threads on Spectrum about the anti-missile gameplay and about the Hammerhead and how the turrets, what they should do, and like giving us the pips for the missiles, which they eventually did. Like if someone didn't know, you can actually lock your missiles on other missiles, right? If you target a missile, you can lock a missile on it. So one of my advisements was like create missiles that are very extremely agile, has extremely big area of explosion, like AoE, right? But have a very small damage. So whenever you will send those missiles to a ship, they will deal almost no damage, but that damage will be enough to shoot down another missile. So having those missiles, and I typed it on Spectrum like I think years ago. So having that type of missiles to intercept larger missiles like torpedoes, for example, right? They have a super fast lock time, almost instant. So you like target on another incoming torpedo, get almost an instant lock, and like fire it off, and it is super agile. It reaches somewhere around that torpedo. It doesn't have to do the direct hit, right? It just explodes somewhere nearby, but because its AoE is so big, it will shoot down the torpedo. It will be such a cool mechanic. Like, you know, you see like your big ship is being torped, you select the torps, launch the missiles, done, right? But you have to have that time of reaction. You have to understand the torps are incoming, be quick about it, disengage from your current dogfight, go launch, intercept, and go back into dogfight, right?
And in unspecialized weapon types, like a jack of all trades, master of none, which you can use for everything, but it might not be the best weapon of choice. In addition to that, you can expect that we're gonna spread out the weapon types as such as well. So you can expect anti-fighter cannons and anti-large ship Gatlings again. Let's talk about shield variances. In 3.14, we had to unify all shield generators of all sizes in order to rebalance them. In 3.15, we started reintroducing differences between those shield generators again.
And this was kind of to bring the shields down more within a window that we were happy with, because before there was a difference of up to 90% between different shields, and we thought that was too much, where the player couldn't really make a difference.
Going forward, we will try to make the shields more diverse again, so that you have a proper decision to make what to take with you, but still it will only be a moderating variable in the PvP outcome, right? We still want the skill in your dogfighting capabilities to be the deciding factor of the outcome of a dogfight.
Okay. That sounds very copium. That's what I think that what the majority of community wants. You want to be able to tweak things to a certain extent to what you do, but for it not to be like World of Warcraft when your gear score matters, right? Obviously, I'm not saying like there's no skill like in PvP in World of Warcraft. Don't get me wrong, there is, right? There is a lot of like muscle memory and understanding of rotations, but you know what I mean, right? I think that's what majority of the community wants. At least somewhat competitive part of the community in Star Citizen wants, right?
It's been super important for us as far as allowing players to manage combat in Star Citizen. It gives players that really cool option to kind of focus their energy on a particular resource that the ship has. But we're still looking at ways we can improve this. So we're looking at kind of adding a non-linear curve to these things. So
that's why I didn't want it to comment on it, right? Because I want to hear this first. Like that's something I was talking about, like about the curves of how they kick in, how fast they kick in, the capacitors. Like I'll let them speak and then I'll talk about capacitors more.
It doesn't just come in at the same rate throughout the whole kind of regen. And we think this might add a really interesting dynamic and just an extra thought that you've got to put in there when you're managing your systems.
And we're also retiring with the idea if the weapon capacitor assignment, for example, should affect all the turrets on a ship, which is currently not the case.
Yeah.
An important thing we added in 3.15.
That's another thing, because when you're running a gunship, let's call a Carrack a gunship. Like by a gunship, I mean a ship where pilot has no guns, right? I'm not saying Redeemer is not a gunship, but that's what I mean by saying like when you're flying a gunship where the pilot just have no guns. There is no point, for example, for a pilot to keep his power on guns, right? Because turrets are disconnected. That's a very good call for them, right?
15 are minimum regen for all power triangle assignments. So even if you have your full assignment, let's say put to engines, you get still a little bit of regen in your weapon capacitors and on your shields. So flight tuning, right? By far the least important aspect of...
Okay, probably they're done with the capacitors. Let me kick in a bit with a maybe unpopular opinion, okay? So I will tell you a story. Recently, I was playing with Dashcam and Arena Commander. I would say he is a competitive pilot. I don't know how you can put him in the ladder of like competitive pilots, right? He plays smart. He won't like... he utilizes game mechanics at its full extent, right? If he needs to disengage, he will disengage. He's not one of the like dogfighters who will just, okay, we duel to death, right? He will utilize any possible like game opportunity not to die and to win. If he is losing, he will disengage, right? And he told me the way he uses capacitors, right? Some obvious things, obviously, right? So you recharge the guns when you do the pass, like full shields, not to lose shields. Then you switch, then you switch, then you switch. And the more I listened, the more I understood the way people utilize capacitors to gain the full advantage of the system becomes less and less a decision making. It's kind of important, okay? Sorry, I might be a bit long here, but it becomes less and less a decision making in combat because of what's going on with your environment. It becomes more and more just a muscle memory of things you do like every pass repetitively. And I think at some point when CG wanted to introduce the system, they wanted to go away from it. When I talked to one of the CG employees, they use a very good word, tribalism. Before the capacitors, remember when we had overclocks and all that? You go into a ship, right? You take a meta loadout, and then you go to MFDs, overclock this, overclock this, overclock this, let's go, boom, died. Overclock this, overclock. It's like repetitive actions that make no sense. They add up nothing. It's just about you knowing that that has to be done this way, and you basically almost never change the approach to pressing those buttons. I hope you understand what I mean. There is no actual decision making. Sometimes you may diverge like from that kind of approach, but you usually don't. And I think that's the problem with the current state of capacitors, because that's what they force you to do. And on top of that, the way like he told me everything is bound made even less sense in terms of a logical game. He has the capacitor control bound like on his joysticks, on his double triggers, so he doesn't even participate. He doesn't think about it, right? He doesn't think about it. Like his capacitors play because of when he shoot. Like he has dual trigger or something, right? And he will like press it. And like when he shoots, like the moment he starts shooting, like it clicks into the like full shield modes, and then it clicks back. Like it's the more I listened to that, the more ridiculous it became to me how bad it is. Okay, Espionage, you're saying it doesn't it assume that the other pilot is also doing that? If the opposing pilot changes their strategy, shouldn't you have to break out? No, that's the point. That's the whole point, Espionage. Because no matter what your pilot do, this is your preferred way of fighting. It doesn't affect anything. No matter what what the opposing pilot does, it will not affect the strategies. That's the whole point, right? That's the whole problem of it. You will still be fighting with that strategy because that's the only that's the optimal strategy, right? It will be more down to your aim, and that's about it. That's the whole issue about it. It will be more about your aim and like your corkscrew or whatever, your positioning. Everything else will be still the same automated. Hear me out on this, okay? Hear me out on this. If CAG right now will remove capacitors, a lot of people say that capacitors, kind of capacitor gameplay and like the changes that are due to 3.14, right, made the combat better. And I don't disagree with that. The problem is a lot of people don't realize that it's not about the capacitors. It's about a secondary factor. It's about the fact that like overheat is gone, overclocking is gone, and all of that. If you give players chips that will fly the way that they have capacitors at 100%, all of them, right? All of them. So imagine you're boosted at 100%, your guns at 100%, and your shields at 100%. Shields like whatever. Shields is just like the, and shields is 100%, let's say, right? No one will notice the capacitors are gone. Other things made combat better. It's because ships stopped it overheating. It's because like different things. The guns are like more readable, and the overheats are more readable on the guns. It's not about that switching you do in between the passes. No one would even care if the capacitors would be gone, if ships would just perform like where all of them are at 100%. Because what players do is just this micromanagement of like in between the passes. And that is actually not interesting. Honestly, it's just more keybinds on your stick and on your keyboard that are actually not benefiting the combat. It's not actual decision making because you don't do decision. The decision is done before the fight because your decision is to press that button after the pass, basically. There is no decision making, almost never, when you're in a tight dogfight. The decision is done. The decision is done before you even spawn the ship in Arena Commander. How you're gonna play out those capacitors. There is no decisions. So my point is that it's not the capacitor like switching you do like 1 to 3 or whatever buttons you press or however it's automated for you. When it is that players say that they automate capacitors to be the same buttons they use for doing other things like shooting guns and pressing boost and all that, that means there is no decision making because they're making no decisions. They've set up their controls for capacitors to be automated. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. This is very important. I might not be the best dogfighter. I'm very average. It doesn't mean I don't understand how shit works. Because being a best dogfighter is more about just spending infinite amount of hours in Arena Commander, maybe being not mouse and keyboard, but like stick and mouse or dual sticks, right? I don't have to be a best dogfighter to talk about this. People have tuned down their ships. So like on the sticks, they have a dual trigger. So when they push the trigger button, like first click is firing, and then like, okay, I don't know, Dashcan will probably kill me for this because I don't know if he wants me to talk about it, right? And it's not something that don't get me wrong. He's not breaking like the game rules. He's not like trying to do some macrosing that is not allowed. No. It just probably maybe he doesn't want for me just to talk about it. But I'm sorry, dude. Like if I'm breaking like your privacy, I'm sorry, but I have to talk about it. So for example, he has a dual trigger. The dual trigger on a stick, it has 2 stages: 1 click, 2 clicks, right? Second click. So for example, he has everything on guns. He recharged the guns to the full. So having guns at 100% will give you more shots. So when he goes in for a pass, he starts firing. The moment those extra shots are fired that you get from the capacitor on guns at 100%, he presses the trigger further and it switches the capacitor with the second stage of the trigger. It switches the capacitor to full shields. So when the actual pass like starts close to close, he instantly gains the resistances on the pass to mitigate damage, and it doesn't affect his guns, right? Because he has the charge. And then the moment he releases, he does some like other trickery with keybinds, which is absolutely legit. There is no like macrosing there, right? And he gets his ammo back. And when he like boosts, right, or something, he gets his instantly to all engines. It makes no sense. There is no decision making in that. That's what I mean. That's like, yeah, it's no, it's kind of no secret. It's just either you're lazy to do this, or like me, you just protest to it because it's not a good gameplay. And you don't do it because you don't care. You want this to be better. I won't do this because I don't care. I understand this is so temporary. This is just wrong. CAG, sooner or later, they will understand it and CAG will change it. And I don't even want to get you used to it. I would just not dogfight because like that's the reason why I'm not getting competitive for such a long time. Last time I was like sweating in Arena Commander was so long ago, right? Because all of this makes no sense to me. It just doesn't. And those things have to go away, right? That's why I say the capacitors are not the decision-making in their current state at all. It's just the combat got better because like the ships started behaving better. If you remove the capacitors, the combat will be even more better. You're like pilots will actually focus on more on flying and aiming rather than like switching like 3 more buttons. So hear me out. There is something, an unpopular opinion. At least for single-seaters, there should be 1 capacitor. Okay? I will repeat this. For single-seaters, there should be 1 big capacitor. Do you want me to repeat this one more time? Like third time the charm. For single-seaters, there should be 1 capacitor. If you want to put it this way, think Starfighter HunterNet, where they're gonna be real decision making. When you will have 1 fat capacitor that will feed your guns, your boost, and your shields, and everything you will need to know, all the information will be in that 1 bar. That's where decision making will come in combat. When you will see your capacitor, you will understand what you want to do and think what you want to do with that capacitor. How much you want to press on the guns, how much is left for your like shield recharge. You can spend it all on boost if you want to catch up with the target. There will be much more decision making, actual decision making in combat when you will have 1 capacitor. It will be less mechanical, more decision making. I'm not fucking kidding you right now. Maybe I'm not against the capacitors as they are for bigger ships, for multi-crew ships. Maybe it's even a role for a co-pilot to deal with the capacitors in a multi-crew ship. But single-seaters should get rid of triple capacitors. They make it a painful thing. Just think about it. Just think about it on your own without trying to prove me something. Think multiple times of it and like let it digest in your head. I think with 1 single big capacitor, there will be much more decision making in single-seater dogfighting than it is right now with triple capacitors, where it's just like also like the way the guns work. I completely disagree with the way the charges work with the guns. I think the gun charges should have worked just like a boost capacitor does, where there is a bar of energy and every gun has its own setting of how much energy it takes per shot. And there should not be no limitations for the gun how long it fires besides the heat factor, that like green yellow bar at the bottom of how much it can fire. It should drain the bullets, the ammo from the capacitor, the charge. It should be able to drain until the bar of the capacitor is empty. There should be no Panther 23 out of 23. It should drain from the capacitor until it either overheats or whatever. Yeah, it's just about the balance, how much guns can drain from the how much energy they drain from the capacitor per shot. And that will open up also a lot of balancing in future that can be done. Like there could be like powerful guns that they will eliminate your capacitor, but they're powerful and all that, you know? This like 23 out of 23, it's just bad. I'm sorry, CG. It's my personal opinion. Everyone can have it, and that's my opinion. It's just bad. The shields are a different story. Like, I think the shields should also like leach out the capacitor energy, right? From that bar when they recharge. And you can build up on that. It's like, whatever. Then the system can be complicated even further. Like if you want to like harden your shields, like you could do something like, because capacitor is constantly recharged by a power plant. Power plant emits a certain amount of charge, right? It emits a certain amount of charge into your capacitor, and other things deplete that charge, right, from the capacitor. Like all these cooldowns, they make very little sense. It's just about like the balance, how much your power plant can input, right? And how much everything leaches out of it, right? So if you harden your shields, like shields may start taking like 3 times more of power from the capacitor, even if they're not actively charging, right? And then the charge of the shields is more pressure. So, but the way it is right now, I just don't feel it is okay. Okay, I think I'm done with it. Talking about it even more, it will just like lead this conversation into hours. Okay.
Capacitors and on your shields. So flight tuning, right? By far the least important aspect of combat tuning. Just joking. No, we're not happy with the current flight tuning. What we did in 3.14 and 15 was pushing the ships into an archetype space. But that also meant that a lot of the differences between the ships were lost. And we also had to trick some numbers here and there. For example, ships can now strafe up way faster than they can strafe down. That is down to some magic numbers we added, but we actually want to reduce these magic numbers and
that's good to hear.
Do it properly with the thruster tuning. This
That's
will be, however, a longer ongoing process, but in the end we will get a more realistic feeling ship handling out of it. What we added in 3.15 by very popular demand are options for the TVI visibility, so you can go into your options now and set your TVI visibility to always on if you do not want the TVI to fade away. This will take a considerable amount of time, so this will be an ongoing thing for quite a while. And an important disclaimer here, we'll try to be as real as possible, but we always have to take it back to the point of fun. We're not aiming for realism, we are aiming for believability and enjoyment.
That's good. So the flight tuning, what he said, like a lot of ships lost their character. I always keep this example, like there's always meta ships, right? It's my favorite example. When we have a Buccaneer, that is a ship with, it's basically a cockpit with engines and guns. I would expect the ship to be one of the best ship at a forward acceleration. It may not be strong at strafes, but I expect the ship to be crazy at forward accelerations. And I expect when you press boost on that ship, no matter how short it is, you literally fucking black out. It does with you, right? So it's like an interceptor to chase someone, for example. It might be not the best in a dogfight, right? It might be not the best in a dogfight, but I expect those things in future to happen with ships, that they like have this believability, how he said, compared to what they look like and what they feel. So yeah, I wish they worked more on that, honestly.
The idea of trimming was born out of 2 things. First, players who play decoupled, they wanted to have a control to actually hover at a certain altitude. And the other thing was we looked at how military choppers implement their trimming systems. And then we thought, maybe that is something that can be added, especially for dual stick users. So we investigated a trimming system where you can push a button and then set your left or your right stick in a specific position, and you let go of the button, and the ship will keep that input. And any kind of input you do afterwards will be in relation to that. So,
oh, that's nice. I understand what that is. That is actually not bad. If it's a side project, though, I would be happy if, you know what, they didn't only do this for dual stick users, because that is like, what? Why am I not able to set trimming to on a keyboard? Like, I'm sorry. If I press a button for trimming, why holding a certain direction will not fill a bar on that strafe, right? I wouldn't mind that. I mean, obviously, I understand why they're talking of dual sticks. So you keep the stick at a certain position and you press the trim button and it remembers that position. But you could do that the same thing for the keyboard, where you would have, like, you press the trim button and then you press like strafe up, and it will slowly like fill the bar of strafe up from like 0 to 100, and then you release and stop, and it will keep that, right? I don't know, boys.
currently, we have this in a prototype state, and we'll try to.
I need to
give
talk
the
to them
players
about
once
that.
it's out. This kind of system will allow mouse and keyboard players to have a smooth thruster control again. As
Oh, give me a second.
now, mouse
Wait, I didn't understand that.
and we'll try to give it to the players once it is out. This kind of system will allow mouse and keyboard players to have a smooth thruster control again, as it will
Will allow mouse and keyboard players to have a smooth thruster control. That's basically what I was talking about for so long. If you're not flying, I wonder if they're talking only about decoupled or no. Because right now, that's one of the things I was like complaining so much about. I'm not using thrust, right? My forward and backward thrust on this thing, right? It's actually not keys. It's axes, right? The buttons are bound as axes because these buttons are axis sensitive, right? They're push sensitive. So one of the things that is so wrong with a coupled system is that in a coupled mode, when you have your forward axis, it defines your maximum speed, which is completely wrong. Why a thrust in a coupled mode cannot just why a go forward button basically in a coupled mode cannot just define your thrust output to the forward engines. I don't understand if that is what they're talking about or not, but they need to change that. That is so bad. It affects so many things. Okay, let's go.
allow mouse and keyboard players to have a smooth thruster control again, as opposed where currently when they press W and S, they just go to the full forward and backward motion. So that gives us a little bit more control when this type of control is needed. As you might have noticed in 3.14, we somewhat botched the auto gimbal implementation. During flying, you will see that the auto gimbal aiming crosshairs, they will kind of like go all over the place. So in 3.15, we actually fixed that and rewrote how the auto gimbals work. However, we are not really completely happy with the auto gimbal system because at the moment it feels for us like it's being a skill bridge instead of having an actual purpose in the game. So going forward, we're going to investigate what the actual purpose of auto gimbal or the auto gimbal mode in general should actually be. We're also investigating further things like turning off your weapon assists on purpose when you need it. This is certainly not something that the average player will do, but we know a couple of PvP players who really would like to have that option at times.
Actually, that's good to hear. When you are doing the when you're fighting the big ships, you want that off sometimes, for sure. When you need like subcomponents and all that.
And good news for 3.16, we're adding staggered fire groups for pilots. So we rewrote the staggered firing algorithm, so now it staggers not between all the weapons you have, but between every type of weapon that you have per weapon group, which means we can completely give this into the control of a pilot.
Nice.
And the last of the short-term plans, turrets. At the moment, we cannot make turrets just better than, or turret weapons just better than non-turret weapons because a weapon is a weapon. But we're currently working with the weapon team to figure out whether or not we can just buff certain properties of a weapon when they're assigned to turrets.
I think that's a bad move. Don't get me wrong. Maybe that's a good move. It's all theory crafting right now. It's all theory crafting, but I think it's just about balancing out the turrets themselves so they give you the upper edge, but not making them super overpowered like they are right now. Don't get me wrong. I'm fine with them being super overpowered because that makes them useful. So I don't mind turrets to be like they are right now, right? With their super assist, because that makes people want to play multicore, and that's good, right? Are they OP too much? Yeah, probably, but that's maybe like tuning their cone a bit here and there with time, right? But I think the most important thing in turrets is like just making turret gameplay better and better. Like, remember I was talking about the sticky aiming, where there could be a button that will make the turret follow the generic direction of a target. Like, basically it will bind the movement of the turret to the center of mass of the ship, which will remove your need as a turret gunner to follow the ship, and the only thing you will have to do is actually aim the moving pip, and then when they do that, you can then reduce the aim assist. So like a gunner on the turret is having something like the same assist that a pilot would have, but because the turret is assisting with the movement of the turret itself compared to the movement of the center of mass of the target, then you can use just the relative mode. You can use the relative mode with it, which is much more precise than a VJoy mode, and you can pinpoint the shots. Like something like that. I think that's important to make. I don't know if making the guns itself on a turret have a different stats is a good call. Maybe it's a good call. I don't want to like be negative about this idea. We'll have to see. Like maybe it's a good call. Like making the projectiles faster. Like you put in more energy, like turret, like whatever, and they go further and faster. Maybe that is not a bad call. Like, who knows? Like, they should try it at least and see how it works out. The little M-bots will require 0 skill. I could teach 75-year-old grandmother to be a proficient turret gunner in 5 minutes. Kilgore. But look at this from that side. That means your grandmother can play Star Citizen with you. Isn't that good? The core problem is that relative mode is broken, and that's why they need aimbot assistance. No, that's not the core problem, Kilgore. The core problem is space combat in Star Citizen. It's about the cross-section of a ship you need to hit on your screen compared to the amount of hits you need to land on the ship, and the speed that cross-section, your target, is moving on the screen and can change direction. Ships can take very little amount of pixels, square pixels on your screen, and it's very hard to hit. And unlike the headshot in Counter-Strike, you cannot destroy the ship with 1 hit or 2 hits in that very tiny space on the screen. You need consistent hits, which isn't real. Relative mode is okay. I mean, I know what you say by saying relative mode is broken. I completely understand. Trust me. I know it's like the angles, the rotations, dude. I understand what you mean. But I think that's like just a side effect of other things that are in game, and that's why it feels broken. I think like different ways of how the turrets work, if they improve it, we will see less and less of a aimbot assist on turrets, and that's, I hope, where they will go to. Aiming is easy if the input is intuitive. I know what you mean. But it's not only about that. I do agree with your statement. I know what you mean about the rotations, how the turret will rotate in relative mode when it is pointing like at the edge cases, like upside and all that. But that's how the turret works, and I don't know if I want this to change, because the way it works is turret has its rotations on the axes, and it cannot rotate on that axis faster than a certain degrees per second. So I don't know if that is even going to change. I think other things should be done to complement it, to mitigate those issues. And then we can see some lowering of that aimbot.
A good use case here is, for example, the hammerhead. While it's very, very dangerous in close quarters, once you get at a specific distance, the bullets, they're just flying too slow to act.
Yeah, that's why they probably want to tweak they want like the projectile speed and all that shit, right?
actually make the Hammerhead a meaningful anti-fighter platform. And this is what we want to change. So we're investigating whether or not we can just buff all the turrets on the Hammerhead without changing the actual weapon itself.
Maybe they should just come up with like specific weapons. Like that's yeah, I understand why they want to do it, right? So they want the faster projectiles and all that, more distances. So there is no like long range harassment. Or maybe just creating a flak cannons. You know, Space Cutlet, it's far more simple problem. Move your mouse 10 centimeters. Slow equals turret moves a certain distance. Now move the mouse fast and the turret moves the shorter distance. Yeah, because the turret has its rotational limitations. That's the point. It's like using relative mode in ship. If you spin your mouse fast, the ship will not go on a yaw axis faster than it can rotate. It fucks up the muscle memory. Yeah, it does. But there are limitations to how fast the turrets can move. You don't have these limitations in shooters because most of the shooters will not limit your rotation of a character. You can rotate around yourself like 5 times in a second in like Counter-Strike or whatever. It's just the specifics of the game, right? It's just the specifics of the game. Just deal with it. Like you cannot rotate the turret faster than you want. Maybe they can come up with a better mode that is like a mix of a VJoy and a relative mode, right? Where you point where your turret wants to go. It's a talk from such a long time. You point where your turret wants to go, and then it will go there as fast as it can, right? But not instantly. If you want turrets to be like instant, it will never happen. And I hope it will never happen because it will be just wrong. So basically, yeah, War Thunder mode. Yeah. Kakasha, that's a good call. Thank you for the sub, by the way. Maybe that should be like a third mode, right? It will be a mix of a VJoy and relative mode. So yeah, I don't know if the improvement of guns, like buffing out the guns, is a good call. Time will tell.
So these were a couple of our short-term plans currently in development. We'll show more of them the closer you're getting to be finished. But now let's jump ahead and talk about some long-term plans. Little caveat here, all these things we're going to talk about haven't been started yet, and they may still change over time, but we wanted to share our thinking just the same. Okay. So one of the most important aspects we want to change in the future is the problem of high speed.
Here we go, boys.
High-speed combat doesn't work well, and we also know that low-speed combat between 200 and 300 meters per second is incredibly enjoyable. How we're going to resolve that, we don't know yet. We'll see. The next part is ballistic ammo management.
I have some advices to them. I'm even tired of talking about it, but they could do it in few steps, right? They can do it in few steps. And I'm sorry, someone wanted me to look at this and like as why things are not changed. And if someone is watching, that's not an excuse for Carrack running faster than an Interceptors.
At the moment, we have very low ballistic numbers in the game, and this is because the physicalized armor system is not online yet. So you can expect some changes towards ballistic ammo and how we manage ballistic ammo in the future. We also would like to introduce a custom operator mode for EMP.
EMP operator mode, yay, let's go.
Because
Rock DS. Oh, sorry, Hog DS. Guys, it was real. Hog DS was real. That wasn't a joke. Now we have Hog DS with a separate operator seat outside of the cockpit that will utilize the EMP. It's coming! Oh no! Will we get a turret also for a prisoner to lower his time served if he shoots down more criminals? Oh no!
As a pilot, you need more data and more information, what you can do in order to shut down another ship that you're fighting against. We also toyed with the ideas of flak. We would like to have a flak concept that is an area denial weapon that works against fighters or missiles or even incoming projectiles.
Yeah, flak, a lot of people talked about flak. Yeah, that's cool, it's coming. I cannot wait to see how it works out, how OP it's gonna be. The only thing I heard good is in EMP operator mode is that you can see how much you need to put down the target. That's pretty cool. But if you will need to switch to it and analyze it for like, you know, 5-10 seconds, then like in combat you're dead. I think it's important to finish off the turret discussion, Space Cutlet. If a target makes a fast pass across the screen of the turret gunner, the natural inclination of a player is to move the mouse faster to catch up, but they get opposite effect. The turret moves less. The turret moves as fast as it can, Kilgore. It will just move the less distance. That's why I'm saying maybe the War Thunder hybrid mode of VJoy and relative mode is in order to be implemented. I completely understand it. That's why I'm saying maybe a mode that will follow. I think the sticky aiming would be a very good thing, where the turret follows the center of mass anyway. You just aim the pip. I think that would be fantastic for the game. I don't know. You will not have to move the turret to try to follow the fast pass. It will do it itself. The only thing you will have to do is aim the pip. Aim the difference between the center of mass of the target and the pip, right? And again, when those things are implemented, we can talk about lowering the aimbot. Because yeah, the aimbot is real. I agree. But if we take the game in a state it is right now, would I prefer there to be no aimbot or for aimbot to be there? I would prefer it to be there. Because if you will remove it, the turrets will go away until something is done again forever. Sticky aiming is not needed if the turret input is natural to the player. Then it will literally be like do headshots in CSGO, but it won't, because the turrets have limitations to rotational capabilities, and it will never be like that. If you want to rotate the turret 180 degrees in half of a second, in like a blink of a second, that will never happen in Star Citizen. It is machinery, exactly. It's machinery. It cannot do it. It's one of the balancing aspects, how fast the turret can rotate. But yeah, but that's what you're saying. For it to be like a headshot in a CSGO, it has to be instant. Otherwise, it will never happen. It will always feel alien. It will never happen. You're saying about a War Thunder model, where you point where you want your tank or a plane to aim, fly, and then the machinery does its best to get to that target, right? That's what he's saying. It's one of the ways, I agree. It's just one of the ways. Don't just tell me that's the only way, right? And everything else is wrong, because none of us ever seen any of those ways working in Star Citizen. So I'm saying there are multiple ways to make the turrets better. Making it a hybrid mode like a War Thunder is one way. Making sticky aiming is another way, but before any of those are implemented, we can just theory craft what is better. Maybe every single way is possible, have different approaches. It's better than aimbot. Yes, I agree, Kilgore. You're saying it like I don't agree with that. It's better than aimbot. Of course it is, but we don't have it. So I would prefer having an aimbot instead of not having compared to not having an aimbot, and all the turrets being completely useless for another year until they implement something with turrets. The game should be skill-based with as few helpers as possible. I agree. It's not that I disagree with you. All I'm saying that the game is like it is right now, and if you ask me, would I prefer turret gameplay to be dead for another year or two, or actually have aimbots so people can have fun in the turrets? Maybe they're low skilled, but they want to have fun and participate in PvP, and they, just for the effort of getting into one ship, they should be somewhat rewarded. I would say better to be so. Maybe tune down a cone a bit, maybe. Okay, let's move on, boys. Let's move on.
A denial weapon that works against fighters or missiles or even incoming projectiles. Also, we're currently working with the AI team to copy typical flight maneuvers that players do to AI ships. In the same vein, we also would like to try to have AI ships not using, abusive behaviors that are, less enjoyable. A last long-term goal we would like to do is to deepen the capacitor gameplay, but this requires also that other long-term changes like, high-speed combat are resolved first. We would like to think about things like adding more thrust, adding more active management on the assignment, and other more active effects.
That was good.
So before we let you go, let's talk about the importance of the community, because this is something which really matters a lot to us as a team.
Community is incredibly important for our process. A lot of the design decisions that informed our combat summits were actually based on proposals that the community did. When it comes to balancing, community is incredibly helpful in providing us data that allows us to nail down issues fast, finding balance problems. They even sometimes tell us, hey, this is the wrong number in the game data that there is. So going forward, we would like to do more playtesting with you, the community. Sometimes we're going to stay undercover, sometimes not. Also, I would like to say that while we might not reply to every Spectrum thread we see, we read everything. So please always give us your feedback, give us your opinions, because in the end, it will help us to make a better game. So thank you for your continued cooperation and support for us, and enjoy IAE next week.
Thank you, Yogi. That was very
What
good.
did we learn this week?
I would like to say the only thing I didn't hear about is armor. I know I talked about armor a lot previously. You know my easy formula, right? X minus Y equals Z with the armor, right? And I know they know about it, but I never heard about it, even in the long term. I don't know if they just forgot to talk about it or they're not considering it. We'll see.
Well, we learned that the vehicle experience team is using every resource available, from real-world subject matter experts to their own experiences in actual military flight simulators, and of course the feedback that you all provide in Spectrum and beyond to make the future of space combat as fun and enjoyable as can be. You take realism, adjust that to believable, and bring it back to fun. Now, the Intergalactic Aerospace Expo begins next week, and it's the biggest ship and vehicle showcase of the year. You're going to get a chance to check out almost everything Star Citizen has to offer, and maybe experience a few reveals here and there. Be sure you don't miss out on that. For Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee. We'll see you all next week.
All right, thank you, Jared. Much appreciated. That was a good watch. That was a good watch. Honestly, I like the talk. I really wanted to hear something about the armor, but we didn't. So it is what it is. Good stuff. Again, something I would like to note that the long-term high-speed combat changes are not the excuse stalling the broken high speeds on bigger ships compared to smaller ships short-term. Those are just values, and they're just wrong. And it's just like the Yogi said, we, the community, tell you for so long that those values are just broken. Ships like 400i, MSRs, even if that's the smuggler, it doesn't matter. It should smuggle in other ways than the ship W. That should never be the answer. 400i, Carrack, MSR, whatever, giving them the speeds faster than a Mantis and a majority of the interceptors is ridiculous. And a long-term high-speed combat changes are not the excuse for keeping those speeds for years, literally years. Okay, I'm done. Thanks for watching.